Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Lessons from Terrible Students. We are the Terrible Students. My name is Jeremy. That's the doctor. Say hello, doctor.
Hello, doctor. It's got to get old after a
Welcome
few
back, everybody.
episodes, right?
Yeah, that's okay. They say we'll get into the groove of it. We'll see if it happens.
We'll see.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are going to be talking about adult learning theory. So all of our episodes prior to this, we were highlighting specific roles and people in the learning space. We're going to move on to a deeper topic, the actual theory behind how we create learning for adults. There are two kind of specific schools of thought around creating learning for school and for grade school children and for adults. It is pretty different things. So we're going to go through with the help of Tara, who knows all of this by heart, right?
So, I have notes.
That's good. But before we get into that, I do want to remind everybody that this podcast is sponsored by Lumius. At Lumius, we are your partner in learning. Okay, so let's get back into this. So, Tara, I know that this is kind of your bag, as they say. This is kind of where you shine. But I am going to try to kind of guide the conversation as much as I can.
That's fine.
And give you as much grief as I possibly can, because that's what I'm here for. So
absolutely,
what I wanted to go through first, I know that we've got a couple on the list of kind of theories that we're going to go through. We're going to talk about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're going to talk about a guy named Malcolm Knowles and kind of how all of that goes. But before we do any of that, I wanted to kind of put my 2 cents in it and kind of give some qualifiers around all of this. I'll say most, I believe it's all, but I'll say most just to cover my own butt. Instructional designers do a lot of these things and apply a lot of these theories, even if they don't know what they're doing. And I say that because myself, I don't have an advanced degree in instructional design. All I have are the experiences that I've had, both being a person that attended these trainings and being a person that develops these trainings. With those experiences, I've kind of, for lack of a better term, I'm falling into doing things along these ways anyway, because when we did our evaluation, we found out what worked and what didn't. So a lot of times when I'm talking to somebody who is very knowledgeable, such as yourself, it comes across of, oh, well, I'm already doing that, but I guess now that makes sense as to there is a theory behind it, and that this was already kind of known to most people, just not to me. I'm just glad that I did it this way, because to me, it just made sense to do it that way. Because again, going back to our first episode, a lot of the ways that I create training is I am a terrible student. So I create training that I would want to attend, that I would want to pay attention to, because I figure if I can keep my own attention, I can keep other students' attention. So that's kind of the way I think about it. I want to make it interesting enough that I don't lose interest. So I wanted to provide that kind of clarification that you don't necessarily need to know this stuff if you're paying attention to what works with your learners. And a lot of people, if they don't already know this stuff, may hear it and say, oh man, that makes absolute sense, and we're doing it that way anyway. Hopefully you'll learn some new stuff. But all of that being said, that's my big spiel and soapbox for the beginning. So I'm gonna kind of take a step back and let Tara run this one for the majority of it. I'll still be here, like I said, critiquing and being the terrible student that I am, and asking questions as they come up. But this is definitely one of the subjects where I lean heavily on her expertise. So I want to make sure that she can kind of help everybody listening the same way that she's helped me. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you. So let's start with, first of all, before we get into Maslow's, is there any kind of soapbox you want to start with, like I did, is there any kind of introduction you want to go over, or do you just want to jump right into it?
Well, I'll add a couple of things. First off, you're absolutely 100% correct. I was thinking about this the last few days as we prepared for this, about how most people who become ISDs or instructional developers end up backing into it somehow, because they were, as we've talked on several episodes, they were subject matter experts in something who were then like, hey, could you write that all down for us in some way? And you kind of naturally will start, you just sort of naturally do a lot of these things without realizing that there is some kind of research-based theory, model, framework, or something behind it. So they almost work as like that thing that's like, it's not vindication, but it's affirmation that, oh, thank goodness. Even if I was doing it right by accident, I was doing it right. So, and I think it's safe to say that if you pay attention to, especially Malcolm Knowles' theory of adult learning theory, andragogy, if you keep these 6 principles in mind, you can develop training because they are very common sense. It's like you said, Jeremy, why are we terrible students? Because we have gone to courses that did not apply these in some way, or not apply one of them or multiple of them. So, and that's how you lose your students. It's about engagement, and it goes back to the very foundation. If you follow these and you pay attention to these, you are going to end up designing something that you want to attend, because we all end up developing training the way that we like to learn. It's just a natural thing that we all do. So that's all.
Yeah. And I do want to jump in. First of all, I think vindication is a fantastic word. Depending on how rough the project has been, that may be the actual correct word. But, you know, and what you were saying kind of brought a memory back as far as, you know, us attending training where they didn't do this. One of the things that is, it's like a core memory when I was, it was actually when I was in college. So I guess, I don't know if that technically qualifies as adult learning theory or not. It is. But
it should be.
Yeah. Pretty close, right?
Yeah.
But I was in an algorithms class. My degree is in computer information systems, so it was a bunch of programming and things like that. So I was in an algorithms class that was at 8:00 on Tuesday and Thursday mornings.
Ouch.
Our professor loaded up. It was like the second day of class, because, you know, the first day is always syllabus and all that. Our professor loaded up the PowerPoint slides, and he had left the slide numbers on the bottom right-hand corner, and it was like 272 slides. And I could still remember going, holy crap, are you kidding me? And I still could not tell you like what the first 10 to 15 slides is what he talked about, because all I'm thinking is it can't be 272 slides. So even if I will say this PSA, even if your PowerPoint deck is 272 slides, turn the numbers off. Your learners don't want to see that huge number in the bottom right-hand corner of your PowerPoint deck.
Yeah.
Turn the slide numbers off.
Well, I have a couple questions. I mean, was that one class period?
That was two. So it was Tuesday, Thursday. So it was 2-hour class. That 270 something slides was 1 week. So that was
2 days.
It was a Thursday and a Tuesday. Yeah. So 4 hours total. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of slides for 4 hours. I mean, I'm not going to do the math, but I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
It's more like a movie when you're clicking through them that quickly.
And he knew his stuff, man. He could, he was a programmer that was kind of doing this class as like his side thing. So he knew it. He knew the business. He was very, very knowledgeable, but a terrible professor. I really felt for him because he didn't like the 8:00 spot either. He would come in pretty groggy.
And that's, you see that, right, with subject matter experts. They don't really know. I mean, they want to give you everything. They just want to brain dump everything. And it's like, okay, wait. Think about what the outcomes are of this particular class and how much do you need to know about that? Yeah, that's very common. And it's very common in higher ed because teaching is a skill unto itself. Praise all the teachers. We do not respect them enough. We do not pay
True.
them enough. All of that.
True.
It is a skill
Regardless of your
set.
state, you don't get paid enough.
Absolutely. It's a skill set, and there is an art and a science to it. So while they do say, you know, those who can't do teach, I would argue that those who can do can't teach. So in a lot of cases. So
Right. Hashtag that. That's pretty good.
yeah.
That's,
So
that's still what they're saying, right? Hashtag that's still a thing. I don't know.
yeah, I think it is.
Track of this stuff.
You're too old to keep track. Please.
Okay. All right. So
all right. Back on topic.
Let's get back on it. So yeah. So we're going to start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I took in college as well. I took a few psychology courses. They talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher this from what I remember, but I'm just going to give the quick rundown, and then you can go into more detail. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs essentially is a pyramid of things that you as a person need to, first of all, to survive, second of all, to thrive. So there's different levels. On the bottom of that pyramid are in multiple different levels that I don't remember the exact order of, but essentially there's food and water, there's shelter, there's safety, things like that. So things that you physically need to survive are kind of the base of this pyramid. On top of that becomes things that you need more to, instead of survive, to live, to thrive. So a lot of that comes from like family, community, relationships, things like that. And then as you go further up the pyramid, you have more things that kind of grow your enlightenment, things that are mentally stimulating. So this is where, in my belief, a lot of our training comes into play and all that kind of things, bettering yourself from a mental standpoint, learning new things, things like that. And essentially the key to Maslow's hierarchy, as far as I know, is that unless you take care of the bottom of the pyramid, you're never going to get to the point where you can learn something new. So that's my kind of 50,000 foot view of it. I wanted to put that out there first and then let you kind of expand on that. But that's my understanding. Feel free to correct me if any of that is inaccurate.
No, none of it's incorrect. I mean, the ultimate thing that the thing at the top of the pyramid is self-actualization, and that's different for everybody. What goals in life do you want to achieve? You don't see Maslow's used a lot in adult learning. It's something you hear referred to a lot for kids. And the thing that they talk about, very basic. If a kid is hungry, they can't learn. So that's why you have breakfast programs and meal programs at school, because if they're not going to be able to have food at home, you want them to be able to engage in learning. And if they're starving, they can't engage in learning. So that is often used. So you don't hear it used in adult learning very often, but I would make the argument that you should at least consider it, because with the economic situation in the United States right now, and in other places as well, there's a very good chance you're going to have some employees that have some food issues, that have housing issues, that have those basic needs that aren't being met. And if they aren't meeting those needs, as Jeremy, you pointed out, if you don't meet those foundational needs, you are not even worried about learning something new or finding self-actualization, because you need to find a place to live, or you need, you have a family to take care of. So it's about knowing.
That's exactly right. That's kind of the point I was going to bring up. I think it's even more important from an adult learning perspective, because I have a wife and a daughter, and if there's I could whether they're providing food or whatever at the training, that's fine for me, but if I know that my wife and daughter are also hungry, I don't care what you're trying to teach me, right? Or if I know that I've got a mortgage payment coming up that I'm going to miss, or a car payment coming up that I'm going to miss, or something like that, I could care less what this training course was about.
Exactly.
All I'm thinking about Uh, like the only thought going through my mind at that point is they're paying me for this, right? Um,
Exactly.
because that's that's what you need to live. So,
Hmm.
but no,
And
that's a
that,
fantastic. Go ahead.
so even though Maslow's is like a psychological theory, it is wrapped up into what Malcolm Knowles said about adult learning theory, which it's the formal name is andragogy, and it's really not
I'm sorry.
that
What was it? What was that?
andragogy.
Go to
Shot
Jane's house? Is that what? What?
andragogy. For
That's a
kids, it's
term?
pedagogy. Yep. For kids, it's pedagogy. And I could pull out like the Greek or whatever to show it to you, but I won't. But andragogy is adult learning, pedagogy is children learning, basically. So, but
Okay.
Knowles, I mean, here's the thing. Knowles either had a dissertation to write or he was bored or something. But basically, he has 6 principles of adult learning. And all he did was write down kind of the common sense stuff that you know about
Hmm.
learning. I mean, there's a good chance that he was a terrible student, and that's why he wrote these 6 things down. Maybe I'll just choose to believe that. And he was like, here's the 6
That's
things
right.
you need to think about before you train me. So, the practical explanation of adult learning theory is that it's all about engagement and how do you engage adults in learning, because they have a very specific set of things that are impacting them internally, externally, and everybody's motivation is different. So, you have to be able to understand that approaching learning like that adults are not sponges. They are not usually empty vessels coming into a training like a second grader comes into second grade to learn new spelling words or new ways to do math. That is not usually what adults are coming to workforce training for. Specifically, workforce training is functional things on the job. You don't need a lot of theoretical background around them, despite the me talking about theories right now. So the first one is the most basic, and it goes straight to functional training. Is what do I need to know? I don't need to know the entire history of this. I don't need to know everything this pen is made of. I just need to know how to use this pen in my job. So, need to know is the most basic one. And that's why keeping it simple, you will hear us constantly saying that, especially to subject matter experts and things like that. It's like, what do I need to know right now in order to be
Right.
successful when I leave this training, whether it's an e learning or it's an in person learning or whatever, or workshop or anything? What do I need to know when I walk out the door today or sign off of my computer today? Very basic.
Yeah, and what that was always called for me were knowledge gaps, right? Like, so when you do your audience analysis, you say, okay, how much do they know? What do they
Mm-hmm.
need to know? And where is that gap? So we're going to start at the end of what they already know. We're not going to teach them everything they already know because that would be a waste of time. So we're going to start at
Absolutely.
the end of what they already know, and we're just going to kind of add on this extra little bit. Maybe there'll be a little refresh of content
Mm-hmm.
that if it's pertinent to exactly what I'm going over. But that was kind of the way that it was presented to me, was
Mm-hmm.
finding those knowledge gaps, training gaps, whatever they're called in whatever business you're in at the time. That's kind of that point of need learning, is just filling that hole that they need filled in with the new content. So
Absolutely. No, and that's absolutely the case. I mean, this is also a chance to, whenever you talk about it or you give people information about it, I mean, they're more likely to remember what you've trained them. And, especially if you put that whole what's in it for me, you always hear us talk about the WIFM. What's in it for me? You've got to tell the learner why it's important and why they need to know it, but you don't necessarily have to just say, you need to know this because. Instead, show them. Show them the consequences of not doing it correctly. Tell them what's, one of the best trainings that we have done that I love so much is like a communication training about why you don't put certain things in emails, because if it could end up in court, and I'm not saying that, okay, that sounds highly illegal. Let me rephrase that. If you are uncomfortable putting it in an email, don't. It's like we used to say when I worked in the newspaper business or when I worked at the district attorney's office, which I know sounds weird, but we've talked about that. But like, if you don't want it to turn up on the front page of the paper, don't do it. That, you shouldn't have to be told that from an ethical standpoint, but sometimes that's what people hear. And I would, liken it to social media. If you don't want that used against you sometime in the future, don't post it. So it's, that's that kind of thing.
It's crazy because I'm going to take a side tangent here just a little bit.
That's fine.
For a long time, I always thought that social media, well, I guess I shouldn't say social media. So to all the kids that weren't around prior to social media, before social media, most online comments were completely anonymous. No idea who was posting, why they were posting. There was no way to track them. There were no user accounts. There was no anything because corporate America had not figured out how to make money off of our data yet. So once they figured that out, that's when they started to make you have accounts and all that to sign in. So the early prevailing idea of the internet and why it was so toxic, because it has been toxic for forever, was people are more likely to say things because they know it can't be tied back to them, because they know that they won't be held responsible because nobody actually knows that they're the ones that said it. Recently, I feel like that theory's out the window, because now with social media the way it is and all of our accounts and all that kind of things, people know exactly who's talking about it. Like you're just in your kind of echo chamber of what you want to hear. And you never really hear anything outside of that. So it's interesting to me that what we originally thought the problem with the internet was that, you wouldn't say these things if people knew it was you saying it was entirely inaccurate, because these things are still being said. And if anything, they're being said a lot louder than they used to be.
And I blame you. I blame you, Jeremy, because you took that algorithm class you just told us about. Okay.
I did. And
which came first, the chicken or the egg on that one?
Yeah. Well, no, it's, I understand how some of these things work. I understand.
Yes.
I won't say that I'm able to recreate it or anything like that, but I have an understanding of how algorithms work, how AI works, and all that, which is, I won't say more than I could say for most people, but it seems like there's a lot of people that don't quite understand how those things work, but that's another side conversation. I just thought it was interesting that the original problem we thought was the internet was not, in fact, the problem, that some people are just going to be terrible no matter what.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and, I don't know how to really wrap that back into what we were talking about, but
yeah, no, like I said, side tangent.
Side rabbit hole. So what do you need to know from this podcast? We'll get back to that. The second thing that Malcolm Knowles talked about was something you also mentioned, Jeremy, is about learner experience. These people, adults, are coming in to training courses, especially at work, with some knowledge of some kind. It doesn't necessarily have to be knowledge about how to do this specific task right now, but they have life's knowledge. They have experience in the job. They have experience, hopefully, using technology or what, they bring in a certain level of knowledge. So you have to respect that when you're training adults. If you brought somebody into a class, an e-learning, or a VILT, and you're going to start from teaching them how to turn on the computer, they're going to be a little irritated. Okay. Because, come on, we got this. Now, not all people. Okay. Hashtag not everybody. I get it. There are people out there who are not comfortable with technology. And you should ask that question. That's part of your analysis of asking your question. Are these people experienced with this? Because if somebody's got a whole population or a whole audience of people who don't use computers on a regular basis, but they want them to go take computer-based training, they need to make sure that they have provided the equipment, and given them the skill set to be able to do that, because then you're not measuring whether they learned anything. You're measuring where they can use the technology. And that, if that's not the purpose, then that's not what you should be worried about. You should make it easy for them, meet them where they are, but also acknowledge that they have that experience. One thing that I used to teach facilitators was, when you do introductions at the beginning of class, take notes about people introducing themselves, about how many years of experience they have and how long they've been doing things, because those are people you can count on while the class is going on to help their peers, or help, get peer-to-peer learning going, or people that, like if you are throwing out a question and you want a good solid answer to it, if they have more experience, call on them. They're probably going to be volunteering to speak, so call on them, use their knowledge. Like if you're, making some formal point, I could then throw it to Jeremy and say, hey, Jeremy, have you ever experienced that in the field or ever seen that? Can you share a story with us? And that engages learners in helping them process the information, but it also makes those people who do have a little more experience and might be in that class thinking, gosh, I already know a lot of this. It gets them involved and it keeps them engaged, and, it plays on their ego a little bit, and that's okay. Just don't let them take over and run you down a rabbit hole or anything crazy. But, and you'll learn that the first time you call on them, on whether that was a good idea or not. So you learn quickly, but, accept that your learners are going to come in with a certain amount of experience. That's also one of those things that I know, Jeremy, for me, when somebody comes to us and they say, well, we want this training to be applicable to everyone. And we're like, ouch. So is this foundational knowledge that everybody's going to need to know? Or, because you really have to understand your audiences, because if you get some piece of learning for an audience that already knows all of this and you're requiring them to take it, you're wasting their time, you're wasting your time, and they're going to be annoyed. And the next time you do a training, they're going to be even less engaged. So, think about that stuff whenever you're getting ready to do that. Jeremy?
Yeah, well, because, and I'm going to jump in a little bit. So, because the way I think about it a lot of times is we want to make sure that everybody leaves with at the same level knowledge-wise. So, we're training to the person that doesn't know anything within this knowledge gap. So, when we're doing our audience analysis, we're saying, okay, if this is for a customer service representative, this is a new process for the customer service representative. We're assuming at that point that they know, A, what their role is, how to perform their role, and that they have some kind of working knowledge of the technology needed to perform that role. Obviously, this is not counting new hire training. New hire training is easy as far as audience analysis wise, because it's okay. They know nothing. We've got to teach them everything. Where it becomes more difficult is where we have, you've got a customer service rep that's been enrolled for 6 months. You've got a customer service rep that's been enrolled for 10 years. Both of them have to learn about this new process or new product or whatever it is. So when you're developing your training, you got to make sure that you can appeal to both of those experience sets. Yep. And, to be honest, sometimes it may take, depending on what the product is and the gap between there, it may take creating separate courses for, this is for CS or customer service rep ones. This is for customer service rep, 5s or whatever the maximum is.
Exactly.
So the gaps are in different spots that you're trying to fill a lot of times. So if you can't do that within one class and keep them engaged, it's best just to separate them in my experience.
Oh, yeah. No, and that's true, because even if you now, unless everybody is performing the exact same task, if it's a new system and all the customer service reps, regardless of what level they're in, are going to be doing the exact same task in the system every single time, then sure, you could use the same training. But if stuff that a CS5's doing, a CS1's not going to see that for the first 3 years, you don't need to be training them what a CS5 does or is going to do, because 3 years from now, you're going to have to redo it because they're going to forget because they're not doing it every day. So it's
three
like you
months. If
have,
they don't do it,
yeah, three,
you got 3
exactly,
weeks, 3 days before they forget that stuff.
exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and that goes a little bit to like learner self concept. That's another adult learning principle. And that basically says that adults make their own decisions. They, some people, I mean, me personally, I think adulting sucks, not to put too fine a point on it, but it's there. We have to make our own decisions. Yes, we're responsible for our own choices. I get all that. But adults do tend to like to be in charge a little bit of their path. So, one of the things that, you do is that's where the problem solving comes in and the scenarios come in, and letting them discover some of the knowledge, not just sitting and talking at them, talking with them. If you're in an ILT or a virtual ILT, it's about discussions about how to do things. Yes, there are going to be processes that have to be taught. And I would argue stick that in an e-learning and teach it to them if that's all it is. But if it's about solving a problem or troubleshooting something or having an interaction with a person, soft skill type stuff, and you're going to do that in person, scenario base it. You can even do that in e-learning. Let them solve problems. Let them kind of figure out what it is. For adults, it's almost more about giving them the foundational knowledge and then the resources to solve the problems, and less about the step by step of every single thing they need to do. A lot of training that we do for, different levels, ones, fives, juniors, seniors, whatever you want to call it, a lot of that is dependent upon, how much do they already know and how much problem solving do they need to do. So, especially for customer service reps, if you have somebody answering the phone, typically there is a knowledge center or base that has the fixes for these different things. And so part of that is them following a script of how to go find that and then following that process. You don't have to go and teach them the whole process they're going to go find. Just tell them where it is and make sure it's there. And that's really all they need to know. Then you give them a couple of things for them to solve, and they have learned it on their own. The important part of that, if you're going to do it in an ILT or VILT, is debrief what they did. Figure out what their thought process is. Where did they go to find the information, so that you can make sure you steer them, because there might be more than one way to get there. But if there's a specific way you want them to use, you want to make sure you catch that early. So there's that one.
And I want to step back to something you said earlier, just to tie it back to kind of some of the terminology that I've heard. So, when you were discussing that you don't want to just talk at them, and you want to make sure that you're having a dialogue with them and all that.
Yes.
So when I was developing some of my first ILTs, that was described to me as kind of the push-pull is what they call it. So we're going to push content out at them, and then we're going to pull the new content and their understanding out of them. So that's another kind of terminology way that it's still based on these theories, but it was added this kind of corporate terminology as
right.
kind of that push pull. So you want to make sure those things are kind of in balance, because you don't want to just have that 247 slides where you're just talking at somebody the entire time. You want to make sure you got activities and make sure that there's some type of interactivity throughout that, and that goes for e-learnings, VILTs, ILTs, use user interactivity, use your breakout rooms, use things like that. So I just wanted to kind of, I'm trying to tie all of these theories back to kind of the different ways that I've heard them through my career. So that's
absolutely.
Push pull, I think, is used everywhere.
Yes. And there's I've got job aids and all kinds of lists of ways that you can use interaction, either in a live class or e-learning, different exercises you can do to do different things that take certain amounts of time. And numbers of people. There's are tons of ways to do that. And it's just important to let adult learners discover some of that stuff on their own. You don't have to necessarily spoon feed them everything. that kind of ties in with another one of the principles, which is a readiness to learn. Now, I am going to caveat this with learnings you're assigned to go to and learnings that you volunteer to go to. Sometimes
Huge
there is
difference.
absolutely. Sometimes there is absolutely nothing you can do as a subject matter expert, as an instructor, or as an instructional developer that is going to make a required training good for everybody. There are just some that you are not going to be able to engage. And I'm sorry, but you're just going to have to let that go. Because when you tell people that they have to go do this, there are some people who just don't react well to that. And here's the thing. If you're going to make them go, please consider, do they need to know it? Are you going to let them go discover some training? Or are you going to talk at them and consider their experience? Do they actually need this training? Is there a reason for them to go? Now, I would argue safety, compliance, that kind of stuff, 100%. If that is something that needs to be reiterated or needs to be recertified, absolutely. And you do your best to make those trainings interesting and engaging. But, after you do the same safety training 5 years in a row, you're kind of like, yes, I understand what email phishing is, but you still have to do it. So that's all you can do about
There's
that.
still people clicking on those links.
That's right. There are still people taking the bait, no matter how many times you tell them. So adults, usually, and I can use myself as an example, I didn't go through my, bachelor's, master's, and PhD in a row. I mean, there's like 10 or 12 years between them. That is how old I am. And the thing about it is I was motivated to go. I wanted to be there. And especially, so people, their readiness to learn as adults, it, hinges on a lot of those things from Maslow's. Are they worried about other stuff? Are they engaged in this right now? If you tell somebody you need to take this training in order to get promoted, they've got a motivation to be there, right? So they're probably ready to be there, ready to learn this next step. But that then, you could weave all these into this thing like, well, then you look back into learner self-concept. Am I giving them access to the upskilling opportunities they need to be able to advance that without somebody controlling it? Do they have the chance and the opportunity to upskill themselves within your organization to be able to do that? So readiness to learn is a huge one. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, and I will say, when I was a technician at the ISP that was around here, one of the things they did really well was career pathing. Like we knew exactly what courses we need to take. We knew exactly, because it was interspersed with, okay, you're going to take these courses and then you're going to need to go work the job for X amount of time. And they had, the exact time frame. And then you need to come back and you take these courses and then you're going to go out and work the job again. So we knew exactly what we needed to do. And each one of those was accompanied with a pay bump. So, okay, this is where you're starting. But from, day one in training, they show you this and you say, okay, this is what you're going to take. This is where you're going to end. So this is your starting pay. You're going to get $1 here, 50 cents here, whatever it is. But we had a reason to be there and pay attention. And we knew that there were benefits to be there. So, and I'll always remember that that's one of the biggest things. And then they were always adding to that. Like I'm assuming this doesn't expire. It may or may not. I was a journeyman cable installation technician with the state of North Carolina, because all of the training we did, we had worked with them to kind of coalesce that program. So when we graduated out of our training course, we were now recognized by the state as journeyman cable installers. Now, whether I ever had to get that renewed, I don't know. I didn't. If I did, so I may not be that anymore. But I do have that certificate laying around here somewhere.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out. Their career pathing is big in, as far as I'm concerned, in adult learning, because it gives you understanding and reason. And you can even look and say, okay, it's coming up what am
Yeah.
I going to be learning? Maybe I can do some things to kind of get ahead
Hmm.
myself. So just wanted to throw that in
Absolutely.
there.
Well, and when we listen to all of these, and I'll summarize the list when we get to the end. I mean, whenever you listen to them, they all tie together. I mean, you are using all of these things in with one another, all six of them at the same time, pretty much all the time. Because what you're talking about also goes to another one of the principles, which is motivation to learn, which ties to
Mm.
readiness to learn and to their self concept and that sort of thing. But there are two kinds of motivators. There are external motivators and there are internal motivators. The external motivators are the ones that people will ask you when you go to job interviews. It's like, what motivates you? Is it a title? Is it money? Is it perks? That kind of thing. So people have that external motivator. Do they want to be promoted? Do they want to make that extra dollar? Do they want to, there's that motivation. But then there's also the internal motivation, which I really hope most people have. It's that their self esteem and their job satisfaction and their quality of life factors that are tied to whatever that training can do. Now, if that's tied back to an amount of money, that's fine. But if you have, there's internal motivators. Like for me, going back to school, totally a personal thing. Just wanted to do it. Didn't have to have it, didn't need it, but wanted it. So there are, stop laughing at me. It's true.
Yeah, no, no, I get it. I don't understand that mindset. I really don't. Like I did well in school. I went all over through, straight through grade school, right into college, got my bachelor's. Um, and then, for me, I think a lot of it was disenchantment when I graduated. I'm
Sure.
like, okay,
Oh,
here's
yeah.
this super expensive piece of paper, and I'm crawling under people's houses because there are no jobs.
Right. Exactly.
So
And that kind of thing's not for everybody. That's why it's like there are tech schools and there are certification programs and there's all kinds of things. And people who enroll in those and go to those are usually motivated by something. They either
mhm.
want a different job or they want a change of something. So even people who are coming to an internal training event, there's something motivating them. And that's why it goes back to the relevance of the training. Is this relevant to me? Is this going to do anything for me as far as, if money's my motivator, am I going to, get a pay bump because I go complete this training? Well, it may not be this one training module. Maybe there's a series of them to upskill to from a 1 to a 2 or something. But tying back into give me that information so I know what I need to do. I'm a grown up. Let me figure this out so that I can work toward those goals. Because let me tell you, if you don't do it internally, there's plenty of research out there now showing that they'll go find another company that will,
Mm.
and that journey mapping and knowing how they can move up has become a very strong motivator for employees at companies. And that's why in onboarding programs that I do, I recommend that you have career pathing and it's visible and transparent and they can see it from day one so that you can encourage them. I mean, you're spending all this money to bring them on. Don't we want to keep them for just a little while? I mean, I think the statistic is like, I don't even remember. It's very bad about how many people leave in
Yeah,
like the first year. I think it's 45% leave in the first year. And one of the things
yeah,
that
and it's
that contributes to that is the why am I here?
yeah. Well, and that's from, I don't remember the article I was reading, but that it's a huge expenditure for
Hmm.
just about every company. Onboarding
Yep.
is so huge, and I feel like from just in my career, I've done multiple onboarding trainings for multiple different audiences and clients and all that kind of thing. And it's so, like, not only are they spending money to develop all of this training, it's
Yeah.
spending money to hire the facilitators, it's paying these people to sit through the training. It's
Yep.
a big deal.
Yeah.
And even to the point now where they're charging people if they leave within a certain
Yeah.
amount of days after onboarding, which is a whole separate conversation. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily agree with doing that, but I guess that's a business decision, and I do not have a
Hey,
business degree. So
I read one the other day that said that that there are companies that even after onboarding pay people to opt out. Like if you aren't going to stay, we will literally
mm,
pay you to leave right now. I'm like, I see it, but I would have to see it in action to know what that looks like. Because I do know also that there's an entire um I don't know, what do you call it, genre out there of people who just go from training to training to training. It has a name and I don't remember what it was, but they go to from just onboarding or orientation thing, just getting paid to go attend those and just leaving because they can get on somewhere else and then go through the onboarding. I would think at some point somebody would check a reference or
that's
something, but that's just
exhausting. It's
me.
exhausting.
It is exhausting. It is. So the
So
last
that's an
the
interesting question. So hold on.
mhm. No,
Side tangent here, because
no,
you said
fine.
that you think somebody would check their reference. Do you think they add that to their resume though? Because
I don't
if I
know.
started somewhere and I was only there for like 2 weeks, which 1 to 2 weeks, maybe 3 is your
Yeah.
onboarding, depending on how much you have
Hmm.
to ramp up. Like, what is the um like the right way or
Yeah.
the upstanding way, because I don't know if I would list that on my resume if I went somewhere,
Yeah.
went through all of it, got hired, and went to onboarding training and said, okay, this is not for me, a completely up and up reason, right? Like, I've gone through it,
Absolutely.
now I know what the expectations are.
Right.
This is not for me, I'm going to walk away from this.
Hmm.
I don't know if I'd list that on a resume because
I
I never
know.
did the job.
Right. And I don't
So
know. But then but then they talk about resume gaps too. So it's like, what have you been doing for the last 6 months? Well, I've just been onboarding hopping for 6 months. I
well,
don't know
yeah,
what
well,
they would say.
I think resume gaps are less of an issue since COVID.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
please, any recruiters or anything like that, if that's not the case, feel free to reach out, comment, and let us know. But I feel like
Yeah.
resume gaps aren't as big of a deal since COVID,
Well, I would
because there
hope
were
not.
other people with a huge gap right around there.
Yeah. Well, and as a
Uh,
woman, women still, a lot of women are leave the workforce to go raise their children and come back. So I would hope that, you know what, just because I have a gap in my resume does not mean I cannot do the job. So, yes, I would
yeah,
hope
but
that
I mean,
that's less of a concern. But you're right, though. If
yeah.
you're hopping, what would you put on your resume? Maybe they list themselves as contractors or something. I don't know. I'm not suggesting that people would lie on a resume, right?
Look, all I know is mine's honest. For
Exactly.
better or worse, that's all
Mine
I
is
know.
scarily
Uh,
honest. It is terrifying. So, the last adult learning
I'm just gonna
principle
start sending them the
is
first episode of this podcast. Hey, this is me,
yes,
guys. This is
this is me. The last one is orientation to learning. And that's really just about that adults, as opposed to kids, which we've already said this because a lot of these go together, they are more life centered and task centered. Adults, like scenarios. They like real world examples. They don't want to know about that one time 30 years ago at the top of, Mount whatever. You saw this one thing and it happened. And oh my gosh, you need to be prepared that this one thing might happen. No, they want to know, what am I going to see every day? And how can I solve that problem? And hopefully then whenever whatever happened once every 30 years on top of Mount whatever happens, I have the skill set to handle it, as opposed to the one war story that never that happens once in a lifetime type of thing. It is, teach them, keep it simple. Make it task oriented, make it scenario based, make it real world, use common issues they're going to see, and give them the skill set to solve that so that they can then move up the pyramid to self actualization because they're ready to receive that information and they can apply it somewhere else. That is, when you look at Bloom's taxonomy, which is a totally different topic, but when you look at the taxonomy of things from, do I need to just know about this or do I need to be able to apply it somewhere else? There is a whole spectrum of learning in there. So you have to decide, what does this learner need to know? And that's where you go back to, who's your audience? What do they know coming in? What do they need to be able to do right now based on this 20-minute e-learning cannot teach them 30 years of job experience. It's never going to happen. Ever.
What? Come on.
Come on now, Jeremy. You know it's true.
Come on.
So
Yeah,
basically,
no, that's absolutely true.
absolutely. So,
and I want to comment on something you said,
Yeah.
because you were talking
Absolutely.
about one instance like 30 years ago on top of a mountain. And my experience is less of that and more of, when you have your SMEs in the call, it's something that literally happened yesterday. Like
Sure.
somebody is going to bring something up that, some
Yeah.
weird thing happened just now, never happened before, and they want to put it in the training. And you're like, okay,
Absolutely.
well, it's never happened before.
Yes.
You don't even know if it's repeatable at this point because it literally just happened, and you want to put it in the training.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk through that.
Yeah. Well, and that's
see
like
what we need to
even
pull out of that.
Absolutely. Well, that's like, the first thing you ask somebody whenever they come to you and say, we need a training about this. It's like, okay, well, do you? What's the problem? What is happening?
Yep.
How are you measuring that? And I mean, if somebody came to us and, came to me and said, oh my gosh, we have to develop a training about this. This just happened. And I would be like, literally, my first question would be, well, like, does it happen all the time? And they're like, no. And I'd be like, well, then how do you know it's a problem? And then you are going to go back into, all the people that you're going to try to force this training to, and then it never happens again. And yes, be prepared is one thing. Now, I would say if there was a safety issue and something happened, I mean, training's not the way to do that anyway. If it's an immediate need, that needs to be a blast email or something going out to a whole bunch of people right now.
For a lot of times when I'm doing analysis, my thought is, okay, is this a training problem?
Yes.
Is this a will problem? Or is this a communication problem?
Exactly.
So what you're talking about, I think, falls into the communication problem.
Exactly. Absolutely.
This is something that you may come across. More than likely you won't, but you need to know about it. That's not training. That's communication. And there's avenues within every company to do that, whether it's email, whether it's Teams, WebEx, Skype, whatever you use, knowledge-based articles, whatever you use. Like that's the method to get something like that out. That's not anything that requires a full-blown training course.
Right. Absolutely. So just to recap, the 6 principles are need to know, learner concept, learner experience, readiness to learn, orientation to learning, and then motivation of your learners. That's all of them. And if you think about those things, and really, if you are an adult developing training for other adults, think about what you like to learn and how you like to learn. And usually common sense will get you there. If you do those things, you're going to get there. Now, are you going to run into some people who are like, oh gosh, we can't build 5 different trainings for this. We need everybody to take one training. Then you have to use your development skills, and SMEs, you're going to have to think about this, and you're going to have to meet in the middle. I mean, lowest common denominator is not always the best terminology to use, but that's where you're going to go. Is you're looking for the mean. You're looking for that average. What is a good
6th grade math? Come on.
What
with my daughter? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, you need enough to train the people or teach the people who don't know anything, but without boring the people who already know some things. So you just have to think about what that looks like and making sure that you are speaking to your audience. And I think if you, even at the most basic level, if you know what your audience is and you know how to talk to them and you can, carve that out, as long as you do that, you can't mess it up. You just can't.
Yep. Fantastic. Thank you. Once again, your expertise blows my mind every time I do one of these. I appreciate it.
You're sweet.
I don't think I've ever been called that, but sure, I'm honest.
Don't let him fool you. He is very sweet. So Look at it now. He's gonna blush. I love it.
Sure.
Who was gonna bother who during this episode?
Yeah. No, I'm not gonna blush. I just, you're lying to the people. I told you what's on my resume is me, and nowhere on there does it say I'm sweet. But no, I appreciate it, everybody. Thanks for listening. We're gonna wrap it up there.
Yep.
We'll be back with you for our next episode. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
Bye.